Allyship means we never stop learning. How much do you actually know about sex work? After training thousands of learners over the past 10 years, Living in Community has developed an online self directed training program to learn more about sex work, including what it is, how stigma plays a role, and how best to support sex workers in your work, life, and community. For more info on the 4 modules, including topics like human trafficking, best practices for service providers, the impacts of Canadian law, and more, go to livingincommunity.ca. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Stripped by Sia, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between. I'm your host, Steph Sia, aka Sia on camera, online, on lots of places. I am a cam model. I'm also a dancer that goes by the name of Kimchi on stage. You probably can't find me anymore. I'm slowly phasing out that title because I don't think I'm dancing as much anymore, and that's like I'm really tired, but that's that. I've been in the industry for over a decade, starting off as a sugar baby, and I've been chatting about not really my experiences too much, but there are episodes where you can find that online elsewhere, but also just bringing people on that I know in the industry every single week to talk about their area of expertise in the industry. So this week is no different. We are going to be bringing on an expert on all things anal today, which I'm super excited to chat about. I feel like people always have all these questions that they're sending to me, and I'm just like, let's compile all your concerns and questions into one giant episode about anal and all things anal today. So I have brought on a guest today that I believe would fit everyone's needs and everything, because there's a lot of people that did request for this particular person to join us today, and they go by the name of Amy Ivy, who will be joining us shortly. But before we get into all of that, I will just say hello to all the Patreon people, all the patrons that are subscribing to all the wonderful bonus content and behind the scenes information and content on my Patreon. If you are interested, there are tiers starting as low as $4 a month that gives you access to all the episodes well in advance. Right now we're running a month in advance, so about 4 to 5 episodes being pre-released to everyone, full video access and content there for you, bonus episodes that are not available anywhere else. So if you're looking for extra stuff, you can find it there, all of my guest lectures and things that are not really so things that are, I guess, more so me, less on the guest, because I never want to put too much attention on me too much. It's not the point of the show. But lots of cool stuff that you can find on there, really cool nuggets. So if you're interested, it's patreon.com/strippedbysia. All of your information, all of your monies that you donate to me are just going to help fund my website, because website hosting is a cost, and that's a cost that I have to incur for the show, where I like to give all this free information to all of you. So if you like what you're listening to and you're enjoying the resources here and you find value in it, feel free to go ahead and hit subscribe. It's patreon.com/strippedbysia. And quickly before I sign off on that part, I just want to say hello to all the lovely people that are on the second and third tiers on there that have been subscribing since day one, or maybe some of you guys are new. So I just want to say hello to Reina, all the way from Sweden, which is really cool. We have Dale Flood from Vancouver, BC, where I am based in. We've got Dan from Red Door Products. We got McKenna King from Edmonton in Canada. We've got Bea York from Seattle as well. Eric Arajo, Geyser, and Snoo from Germany. Thank you all again for your continued support. Some of you have been there since day one, so super appreciate your support over the years. And again, if you want to check it out, you know where to go. And since I have you all here, I'm going to try out a different format. If you like all the content that you're listening to here for free, you can do your homework and rate 5 stars on Spotify, rate 5 stars on Apple, write a review, engage and answer the questions on Spotify. All that engagement, all that stuff, all your lovely homework does help get the show out to more listeners, get some more reviews as well. So it really just helps the community in general, because a lot of sex workers that listen to the show. So I just want to make sure this content is getting out to you, especially if it's not behind some strange paywall or some weird program you have to pay for. I've been doing the show for 5 years, so I just want to make sure that it's getting into the right people and those who actually need it. So feel free to check out all those links and such, and do your homework and rate the show if you have time, if you haven't done already. So coming back to everything anal, I'm very excited to chat about all the things today with our guest, Amy Ivy, who'll be joining us over the next hour to share her expertise on anal and extreme anal as well. So without further ado, please welcome Amy Ivy onto the show. Hi.
Hi. Hello. Thanks for having me.
We're very excited to have you, Amy. As I mentioned to you before, there were a few people that have specifically said your name in terms of like, hey, I'm looking for a person that specializes in anal content. Like, who do you feel should be best? And your name came up quite a few times. So thank you for being responsive and just being open to coming onto the show to share all of your knowledge with the world, and for all the people that have had questions in the past. Now we can all answer them all at the same time and try to tackle as much as we can today. So thank you for coming on. For those who don't know, Amy Ivy is a online content creator specializing in anal content and extreme anal content. All the things online, all the websites online, all the pay sites. You can check on the links that are in the show notes if you haven't already. But that's all I know about you, Amy. I mean, I'd love to hear and throw it back to you, because I also think it's really important for my guests to describe themselves in their own words and terms, and kind of give themselves their own introduction.
Yeah, sure. Well, hi everybody listening. I'm Amy Ivy. As you've heard, I'm an extreme anal content creator. I've been doing that for a handful of years now. I'd say maybe like 3 years or something like that. Um, and yeah, I'd still consider myself like relatively new to it, but yeah, that's basically like what I'm into with regard to my content in general. I mean, I'm into a lot of like electronic music. I'm very fond of like retro games like Pokemon, Earthbound, things
Yeah.
like that. I love playing my Game Boy and stuff.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. And yeah.
Cool. I mean, thank you so much for sharing. And of course, we're going to get more into just a little bit more about you so our audience can get to know you. So, I mean, having entered the adult industry and you've been doing this for a few years now, do you want to share with the audience in terms of like how you got your start in the industry, how you stumbled upon it? If there is a story, feel free to share. Now's your time.
Yeah, sure. So how I got started was I think my interest with extreme anal started a bit before I was actually like posting with it.
Mm.
Um, it was really just like a handful of plugs that I saw were recommended on Reddit. It was like the Square Pick Toys Blunt or something like that. Like I was looking
Mm.
into getting anal training.
Ah.
And that one was specifically recommended. I was like, oh, look at that. Like they've got like a lot of different sizes. And so I was kind of like trying to work up to regular, like human sized things so I could be
Yeah.
prepared for any like human sized
Of course.
insertion, I guess. Um, and so it wasn't until I was like sizing up quite a bit larger than any, I guess, like, human penis, that I was really like, okay, I want to start sharing this. Like, this is getting, this is pretty fun. Like, so just kind of like sizing up more and more. That's when I started to start posting. It maybe was like maybe another year after that until I started doing anything with like monetizing.
Hmm.
But it mostly started with just like a curiosity of just like, oh, each of these plugs are like, I'm able to move up to the next one with relative ease. So I just kept going. And then I was like, okay, I want to share this online.
Yay! Yeah, you know what? A lot of people have similar starts as well. Like they're doing something because they have a natural curiosity about it. They start trying it. They're having fun with it, and they're like, okay, well, maybe it's a possibility to start making some money off of it. which is always great. And of course, like with any kind of specialization and niche content, especially your stuff is like really, really extreme. I'm like, holy shit, like I cannot do that. Or maybe I can, who knows? But like for me myself, who has dabbled in anal as well, but not to your extreme, not to your extreme, it can be really like inspiring, shocking to some, and can be a lot of fun. So I'm glad that like you're able to share your journey on this, and especially for those who are listening, a lot of people are really interested in sizing up too, and we will definitely get into more about tips and tricks, safety precautions, and all that stuff, all that fun stuff, which we'll dive into. But I guess like maybe we can kind of start off talking about maybe some common myths about anal or hesitations why people might not want to participate in anal. I know obviously people think like, oh, like poop on a dick, that might happen, and haha, like that might kind of happen, or potential injury that might occur. What are some things that you have personally encountered, or like when you're talking about the content that you make, any kind of apprehension that folks have met you with?
Yeah, so I think people might be very surprised to hear that if you like if I had like all the toys, if I had to start over from zero, and if I had all the toys that I considered like my favorites and understood like I guess like the increments and the spacing of jumps and sizes, I think they would be very surprised that all the way up to, in my experience, to the size of like taking from the size of one finger to like a 2 liter bottle or something like that. I've gone slightly bigger than that, not literally a 2 liter bottle, but that's just for reference of the circumference. Um, it's not painful. It shouldn't be if you're trying to avoid that pain. You can totally avoid it. Um, but there's just like a lot of tiny nuances and things that you like grasp along the way of putting more time into training. Um, I guess like from the perspective, if we wanted to like zoom out a little bit and think about, um, well, I think like one specific thing that this can also be uh, traced to, I guess, like another myth that this can tag along with is that just like anal is painful in general. Of course, there are sadly some number of people who have had like a negative experience with anal and have been turned off from it for many years. But really, it's like just there wasn't exactly like there wasn't as much relaxation as needed and warm up, like the physical warm up, but also like the emotional and mental, because that relaxation is also a major part of it too.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like talking about training and the relaxation and just preparing yourself for this, it can be a lot for folks. It can definitely be a lot, especially if you haven't done anything like this before. It can be a painful. I don't want to say that it's not a painful thing, but it can be painful for people who are not preparing themselves um, and educating themselves before they get into any kind of like anal play. So, I mean, I think that's really maybe an important place we can start in terms of like, if you're engaging in anal for the first time, whether it's a finger, a toy, or whatever thing that you want to insert into your butt, what should you be thinking about first? If you're thinking about a lot, like a process, like how would you kind of order that and to do things super safely?
I guess broadly it would be, I mean, the two main things about a toy are the material and the shape. Um, so one thing that's always, depending on the length, is going to be a concern, which I would say that like you might not even see much nowadays, is like a dildo that isn't flared. I like typically you'll see like balls on a dildo, or at least there might be like a base that kind of like it flares outward. But I wouldn't really touch a toy that didn't have like it also helps with like gripping it a lot too. I wouldn't mess with the toy that I feel like could easily slip inside, if it had nothing discerning itself from like from a shape perspective, nothing discerning itself from the shaft in the head. Um, that is when something can be easily inserted too far and can be very hard to get back out, depending on like the size and the shape. The other thing would be the material. I much prefer to only play with um, the most body safe materials, uh, which I know one includes platinum silicone, which I like a lot because a lot of manufacturers will offer a lot of flexibility in the softness of the toys. So it might say like you can select a softness on Bad Dragon, for example. It'll say like soft, medium, firm, something like that. I typically only go for, well, Bad Dragon, I might do medium, but I like the in between the soft and medium kind of. For example, on Hanky's toys, I really like 40%, but that's also going to have to consider like whether the toy can stand up on its own with that firmness, or like will it like bend weirdly if you sit on it or something like that. I really just prefer platinum silicone, and things like Hanky's Toys 40% is very comfortable for me, especially when they get much larger and much deeper. That firmness gets like extra uncomfortable. If I had to use a firm dildo for some reason, firm or extra firm, I would only um, do like the size, a small size or something like that. When in my experience, when using the firmer toys, my hole in my insides get worn out a lot quicker, and typically I might play until I'm sore, and that soreness happens a lot faster when there's not much give in the toy.
Right. Yeah. There's not much, wiggle room and stuff too. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's already a few questions that I have with that too. And you use the terms like, body safe. And I haven't talked about this in a long time, in a few seasons on the show too. So I feel like it's a good time for us to revisit. But with so many toy sites out there and like, yeah, Bad Dragon's great. And we also like, on the other side, you have like stuff on Amazon and stuff like that too. Yes, I know that face for sure. But for those who are getting into this who might not be aware of it, I think it's deserving to have a conversation about what is deemed as body safe.
So, body safety to me really means that when you're using a toy, especially in anal, when it's like a very bacteria ridden area of the body, if you're playing with something like a wooden toy that doesn't have a proper finish, I don't know, I don't have wooden toys, but like, let's say, like, you get a $5 wooden dildo on Amazon, if you can even do that. It's
Well, I wouldn't be
likely that,
surprised.
like, I mean, yeah, not even considering something like, the toy being uncomfortable to use, but there's things that, like, if it's not finished well enough, for example, there could get moisture trapped and bacteria trapped inside of like the porous materials, especially. um, this can often happen, I think, in PVC and vinyl toys, which those are typically the cheaper materials. And body reactive or body safety and body reactivity, when it comes to something like platinum silicone, like medical grade 100% platinum silicone, it's not a blend of materials. It's platinum silicone. Platinum silicone is a inert material, which means like it doesn't really react with much in general. It's really hard to melt. It's with and it especially doesn't react with much in the body. So with something like a um typically, I mean, you can usually assume that those uh like jelly butt plugs, the jelly toys are often not the greatest materials. Those materials can leach inside of your rectum, and that stuff will basically just like go inside your body. And when we're talking about like PVC, it's literally PVC. And the rectum is like very good at absorbing things. That's why we have things like suppositories or in things like that. Like the uh, the rectum in general can just like absorb these materials. So when you're not mindful of these things, it's just like more of a long term health. Yeah, consideration.
For sure. I mean, that's something that I feel like people might not think about, or like it can be an oversight when they're just, oh, I'll just get something I want to play with myself, or I want to play with a partner and stuff like that too. But it's definitely something to consider before you even start inserting anything into your body, right? I mean, starting with that too, talking about like, if it is your first time, I know, like, with porn and everything too, you see massive things going into people's holes. But obviously, I think would be very risky if you're starting off with a toy that's too big for you. So maybe we can start talking about, like, in terms of taking baby steps. When it comes to anal or any kind of anal play, maybe starting off with a conversation of the different selection of toys out there, from small like butt plugs and going up to like things that are extra large, and talking about maybe what is a great way to start, and even maybe even before toys, talking about even just fingers and how to approach that in terms of like if we're coming at a very entry level perspective. Maybe we'll start off with there, like anal for first timers or for
Yeah,
newbies.
yeah, for sure. So if it's at all possible, I would first suggest to like not really spare any lube. I mean, you don't have to be like drowning in lube, but like um, a lot of I would say that not there's only too much when you're not willing to like clean it up or make a mess. And I'm very fond of towels and waterproof blankets. So like some people have told me that they play in the bathtub and things like that, where there's less of a risk of like making a mess, or it's like if you do make a mess, it's you know not as bad as if like you're just like on the bed or something like that. Um, so Yeah, I would typically what I do, even when I'm starting with the smaller toys. I mean, if I'm just using my fingers, I'll still coat my entire finger, and I specifically make sure to like lube for even with a small finger and with like any toys in my warm up after that. Like lubing just inside the hole too, because you can kind of like almost think of like, especially when you're tighter, it's like the way that your hole interacts with your finger or the toy is that your lube will not only eventually absorb into your skin, and also if it's inside your rectum, like it'll get absorbed there too. But like if your hole is tight enough, it will kind of like always be squeegeeing off, kind of. So like relubing a lot is always very helpful. And of course, the relaxation is a major thing there, because like if you're very tense, then that squeegee effect is going to kind of be like more pronounced, I guess. So I would start with just like one finger. You could leave it in there, or you could just like finger yourself for X amount of minutes. I don't know, maybe like 5 to 10, depending on like, I don't know, if you have like a playmate, you might feel more or less pressure doing it with a playmate. So, like, for example, if you were doing it with a playmate, I might like that because I don't have to focus as much on using my hand. I could focus on my body and relax that. And my playmate can ask me like, "Hey, are you ready for two fingers or something like that?" Whereas like some people might just feel less rushed if they're just like playing alone or something like that. So, yeah, I would say yeah, just give it like a handful of minutes, and then work up to another two fingers. Um, and then after that, I mean, typically, if you're about to be receiving, if someone else is going to be like fucking you, typically like two fingers is enough for another 5 minutes or something like that. Um, but again, even then, I would say to when it comes to any larger jump, like two fingers to a penis, that insertion, I would suggest it to take it extremely slowly. Like you could take up to a couple minutes just to get it fully inserted like one way in, because that way you just have more time to relax, because again, that relaxation is a huge deal. And I mean, like, generally you can just think about it as like full body relaxation, like deep breathing and things like that, and just like focusing on sensations and things like that.
Yeah, and that's really important. The relaxation, I feel, sometimes can be very hard for folks to get into that mindset, because especially if it is your first time, it's like, oh my gosh, this is really intense. And like personally for myself, I never found like anal to be painful. It's just like maybe a moment of discomfort, um, but then after a while, like, just if you have a good person that you're playing with, hopefully they are doing a good job in terms of being cautious and not applying too much pressure. And this goes both ways too, because like I've played both ways on the receiving end, but also on the other side is a pegging end as well. And it's just that fine balance of like making sure that you're in a good space with your head, but also ensuring that your partner is also okay in this time of being super intimate. So, I mean, what are your tips and tricks in terms of like, getting yourself into that relaxed state? Do you have any specific protocol that you do, or rituals in order for you to get more relaxed? I know you said like deep breathing and just really trying to focus on the full body relaxation, but for those who are at home and they're struggling, I'm just curious about like what has worked for you in the past, if you can recall from like when you first started.
Sure. So the breathing technique that I use in general, this is just like what I like doing anytime if I just like want to relax in general anyway. I mean, like I might inhale for 4 seconds, hold it, inhale through your nose for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds. And so, in if I'm playing with a toy, especially if I'm like trying to max out, if I'm trying to like do some real stress training, um, I basically just lower myself on the toy, and depending how much my hole can really take, if I'm really like maxing it out, my heart rate can really shoot up, and that can also like be a thing that can be like a cyclical, almost like feedback loop of like, it's already an intense thing happening, and then like you've got this huge physiological response. So I always can count on that breathing method to help a bit. um, I wouldn't say it's necessary, but if you have a fuck machine, that can help a lot. If you're able to use that, since kind of going back to what I mentioned about like playing with a partner, you can leave the physical movement to this external thing, the machine, and then you're left to focus just like on your own body and know whatever you can do, especially since like a fuck machine is this exact consistent rhythm and speed if you set it to that. um, I would also try to consider where you're playing. I mean, I did suggest where in like your position of the toy. So for example, I like when I can sit down on toys, like the more massive toys, but that's a bit harder because when you're squatting down on something like that, you have to focus on like your balance, and things like that, and making sure you're not like stretching too far, like with your leg muscles or something like that, or like pulling something. I like to recently, especially with training, I like to have my dildo near like the towel rack in the bathroom, because like um I can just hold
You
on to
can
that,
hold
and that's,
on. Yeah.
yeah, it's just
Nice.
like it's a tiny thing, but it helps a little bit. That's just like a bit less to focus on, because having your mind be a bit less off the balancing, like when you're just standing up, I think helps a lot.
Yeah.
um
Good points for sure. Good
yeah,
hack.
yeah, yeah. And I did mention before, like playing in the bathtub, but maybe playing in a bed just naturally is more comfortable. If I'm like in the tub and I'm trying to hold a position or something like that, then I'm it's just like it's very hard surface, but if you're in a bed, it's more likely you can relax as if you had like towels underneath, if the cleanliness part is a concern. So um some people like music. I don't. I personally don't listen to that. I just like to have as much focus as I can on the toys when it comes to the more extreme stuff.
Right. And everyone's different though too. So it's just like I think like for those who are listening at home, you'll just have to find out what you're gonna be vibing with, what is gonna make you most comfortable. I did like what you said earlier too, in terms of like for myself, I actually it's a mind block thing. Like I cannot play by myself with anal. It's too much pressure for me. I've tried relaxing, it doesn't work because I was like, "Do you do anal play?" I'm like, "I don't do that because it's too much pressure," and then especially when I'm getting that request, it's just like too much in the mind. So I would actually prefer that I have a partner do that so I can just focus on my breathing and focus on relaxing and just chilling the fuck out as much as I can because it can be very intense. So thank you for sharing that. I know we briefly went over lube, but obviously lube is such a freaking huge topic and super important, especially when it comes to anal. So perhaps we can go into that topic in terms of like different types of lube that's out there. Don't I mean we can go into particular brands and stuff too, but like there's just a lot of options out there. So, what do you look out for specifically? And when we're specifically dealing with toys specifically for anal,
What do you mean look out for?
like what when you're trying to find a good lubricant, what are you looking for specifically?
Yeah. So it's gonna vary based on what toy I'm using. So if it's something like a more tentacle type toy, like a deeper tentacle type toy, I like something that's a bit like thinner and can be easier to work with. If it's like a massive, short, stubby toy, I like when lubes can be thicker. So as mentioned, like that squeegeeing effect of the hole around the toy isn't like pushing all of it off. Um, Lately I've been liking different degrees, I guess, of like oiliness. And that just means like I typically make lube with like X lube or K lube and have been putting Crisco to different ratios. And so with a shorter, much thicker toy, I'll like a lot more Crisco because while the watery part of the K lube or X lube can slide more easily off that, the Crisco is going to really stick onto that. Um, so really, I guess most lubes, it's just going to come down to staying power, like how quickly does it dissolve, and also how much do you have to reapply, and how much do you have to use. Um, so, like I guess if a lube it's doing its job, it's just like you're not thinking about the lube, It's like it's just like you're thinking about everything else going on.
Yes.
So yeah, it's really just like the durability and staying power of it for me. That's a big deal.
Totally. I mean, like in terms of like, so we're also talking about like body grade material too, but like I know when it comes to toys and certain lubes, there are certain lubes I think that work better with certain toys, some that is safer. Perhaps we can also go into that topic. So I also think it's might be worth mentioning.
hmm Um, so if you mean like safety as in like toxicity, to be honest, I'm not totally sure about different formulas. I'm not too sure of all the chemicals that really like go into lube in general.
Or like even just like water-based lube versus like an oil-based lube. Like, are there any major differences, and how can that affect your toy or can affect your session?
hmm so water-based lube, I would say. So technically, K lube and X lube are water-based lubes, but they're powdered lubes and you make them yourself. But when I'm in terms of like water-based lubes, like pre-mixed things, like typically I just order something off of Amazon. It's called like Fave, and I personally haven't noticed too much of a difference between different water-based lubes. I mean, maybe there's like a super great one out there in terms of like the pre-made ones, But I would say those pre-made water-based lubes become a lot less relevant the further you go into depth and width, because it just tends to dry up so easily. And I think that's just like, it's just formulated that way specifically. Um, I personally haven't experimented super or a ton with like silicone based lubes with toys. Typically in like interpersonal sex, I'll do things like that. But when it comes to like my actual toys, I don't buy. Uh, I haven't really used. I don't remember the last time that I've really used like a specifically silicone toy. I've been using like, I started with J Lube a couple of years ago, but it's really been like K Lube and X Lube for the past couple of years, and those have been very much. Those have been like the solid ones.
Mm. I mean, and talking about like material too, like is there, I didn't ask you this earlier, but like is there any particular material that you prefer when you're sourcing out new toys? I know you mentioned premium silicone too. I know there's a lot of different materials out there, but that's kind of what you would prefer.
Yeah, it's really just like a soft to medium. What's that?
The most neutral and like in terms of like touch and feel, and that would be like best for you.
Yeah, I think it's just like it's just the most pleasant to work with. Like, I mean, in terms of body safety, there's also certain metals, certain glass. Um, those are great for sharing, especially because those are though I don't know what specific glass or what specific metals, but like um, the Enjoy Pure One, for example, is a really good toy that I like. That's metal, and I like those because those can be like cleaned very easily, especially when it comes to like sharing. Like that is total for me. It's total peace of mind. Like with because normally I don't like sharing maybe a platinum silicone toy, but metal and glass is okay. But it's just like a soft to medium platinum silicone is really my favorite, just because I just find it the most pleasant. It's very soft and squishy, but not like too squishy that it doesn't completely fall on itself. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
It's not like a noodle.
No, we don't want that. And I guess we're going to transition to also to talking about like, cleaning your toys too. We just briefly mentioned that right now, but I think it's probably a good time to move over onto that topic as well. But let's talk about the importance about cleaning your toys, because that's super, super, super vital, super, super, super important, because you're putting the stuff inside your body. Let's maybe tackle that topic on, we know maybe what's best, what do you use in terms of like what is best to clean your toys, how do you clean your toys properly, etc.
Okay, sure. So typically with really, if you're just like just playing with one dildo, I mean, I might use this like foam cleanser that I just searched on Amazon. Um, I know there's one called like Revive antibacterial toy cleaner, and typically I'll use those if I just need to wash off one toy, but usually for my recording sessions, I'm playing with like 4 or 5 like XL toys. So I actually have these like uh they're like 6 gallon mop buckets, and I've got a couple of them because sometimes I'm like, these are the dirty toys, these are the clean toys. And I just like squirt in a bunch of Dawn dish soap and then just turn on my like the shower, the bathtub, water.
Yeah. I get you.
And because like once you're playing with super oily lube and super huge toys, like if you're using that spray bottle just for one toy, like that's going to take like 30 minutes of washing, because you need a lot of water too, because um X lube and K lube are notoriously pretty. They're extremely slippery, and so like even without the oil, like Crisco or maybe coconut oil or something, you're gonna have to be like rubbing it for quite some time. So just putting it in the bathtub is just a lot easier, or the kitchen sink or something, and just Dawn dish soap. But that's for platinum silicone specifically, which is basically what I mean, I don't know what toy wouldn't behave well with being cleaned with Dawn dish soap, but that's just what I use because I only use platinum silicone right now.
Yeah, that's important because I feel like people forget how important it is to clean things, unfortunately.
Yeah, I saw this like
Yeah.
I saw I saw like a listing on what was it, Reddit or something, for like a toy selling subreddit, and there was like black mold on this toy. I was just like, they discounted it or something. I was just
No.
like,
Oh my
no, that is
gosh.
a nightmare. I don't know. I'll never
Oh.
forget that. It's like seared in my brain. Yeah, don't let that happen. I don't think that I don't I mean, if you leave moisture on some of your toys, I'd imagine that would happen. And
Mm-hmm.
if it's like in a wet environment, maybe that would happen, but
Right.
I don't know the exact circumstances.
Totally. I mean, like with cleaning, I feel like that the conversation also includes drying your toys too. Are you air drying your toys, just letting it air dry out, or are you kind of wiping it down with a fresh cloth or anything like that? Or, I mean, it's important to note as well, though.
Yeah. So I usually air dry them right after I wash them in the tub. I just kind of like, I might roll them in a towel really quick, but otherwise they go into that other 6 gallon bucket where they just air dry in there, and then they just chill in there until next time I play with them.
Yeah, yeah, similar to me as well. Just like kind of wash it, let it air dry, let it do its thing. Because as you mentioned, any kind of moisture can potentially be a breeding ground for bacteria. And again, just to stress the importance that, like, we really don't want to be inviting any kind of external bacteria, especially when we're going to different orifices inside our bodies. So, for those listening, please don't be lazy and don't procrastinate on this stuff. It's important for sure. I know that you specialize in extra large dildos, extra large toys. Talk to us about how did you even get there? Because when I'm watching your content, amazing content, inspiring. I know I don't think I'd be able to do that, but like, wow, crazy. um if other people are also looking into your content and wanting to go down a similar path as yourselves, how do you size up to something that large? And if you can, if you want to share with the audience in terms of like how large we're talking about to give them some context, that might be helpful as well.
Sure. So I, I mean, I'm not at this max limit right now. But the largest I was able to get to is 13.5 inches circumference. So I think that might be like
Wow.
one inch circumference bigger than a 2 liter bottle. I think it's a couple inches bigger than like a softball. I don't remember. I
Wow.
tried to like keep these
Measure
like
it
real
out.
life examples here and there, but I'm not maxing out so much recently. But
Mm.
so yeah, it's really gonna be like, it's really going to depend on the shape of the toy. I think is really the biggest thing, and whether it's something that is made for training. I mean, like you can get things like anal training kits. Uh, on Mr. S Leather, they have like silicone ones that are um, good quality. Like I think those are body safe silicone, whereas typically you might see like a jelly set that is likely to not have as good of a body safe material, which is also an important thing to consider if you're training with plugs, because that's how I started. I was just like leaving plugs inside of me like for a couple hours at a time. So that toy safety, material safety becomes even more important when it comes to plugs, because they're in contact with your rectum even longer. Um, so what I started with, and if I had to do it all over, I was doing the Square Peg Toys blunt plug. That's how I got started in the first place, and it was they have like something like at least 10 different sizes of it. And while I was working my way up, they just had so many sizes. I was like, surely the next size might be like, I might as well just try it. And then I noticed that I was able to take it with some with relative ease. Yeah, yeah. And in retrospect, I would probably, instead of getting every single plug, the blunt plug from Square Peg Toys, I would maybe get every other one, because I found in my experience that when it comes to increasing the size that your hole can take, what felt like a comfortable jump in size and circumference, not diameter. And circumference was a jump of about like 1 to 1.2 of a difference, 1 to 1.2 inches in circumference, like that. The when it, let's say if there's like this dildo and this dildo or something, the next size up being about an inch to 1.2 inches circumference, that is what felt like it was giving me a challenge, but it didn't hurt. Once you start going up to differences of like 1.7 inches, that when I did that, it was a bit more uncomfortable. And I would say 2.0. I mean, this was for my body specifically. I mean, these numbers might, I don't know how much different they would be for, a guy who's like 7 feet tall, whose, body just is much differently shaped than mine. But so I can't say these numbers are like universal to everybody, but I would say like going above a 2 inch jump is like a hard no. Like I would never do that. I think that would hurt a lot. Um, but it's it's a little different when you're considering using something like a butt plug that has this like set width versus like a dildo that starts off at like 4 inches circumference and then ends at 9 inches circumference. It has a huge taper, so uh, when you're using butt plugs, if you're able to do that, it would be more like economically efficient to get a largely tapered plug or a largely tapered dildo. But it helps that having butt plugs are these like individual units of sizes. Like this is the size that I'm at. Whereas like as at a dildo, it might be a bit harder to gauge where exactly you are if it's a huge dildo that has a huge taper.
Right. So pros and cons to both.
Hmm.
Really, really interesting. Yes, thanks for being so specific as well,
Yeah.
which I'm hoping that the audience members will find useful. I
Hmm.
mean, talking about like the difference between discomfort and pain and knowing when to stop, because unfortunately, like myself as a cam model, I see it so many times. Like I see models trying to insert things that maybe are like too big and doing it for the show and stuff like that, and just dealing with toys that are maybe too big for them, and seeing what would consider painful. There is really a fine line between that, and like when do you know when to stop, and you're like, oh, I can go a little bit further, I go a little bit further. um and I know everyone's gonna be different, but like I want to just hear from your own experience.
Yeah. So typically, although I would say that I have taken things pretty extremely slowly, and I might get like a single toy just to help me get in between a size to another size. So I would consider myself lucky like to be able to do that. But if I notice that I'm taking a lot of time than usual with previous toys, like I've had experience jumping from this plug to that plug, and I noticed that this one time I used this plug only 2 sessions, and then I was able to go to the next one. Um, and then we have this other like third dildo that I've been trying for the past like 5 sessions, and I can't seem to move at all on it. Like if I'm noticing that I'm not making any progress, um, if my hole's just not accommodating it and it feels like I really have to force it, I feel like that's when something bad is going to happen, and I just like I might try again, but typically just put it down and I'm just like, okay, I'm not ready for it, or I need a size in between this and that toy, like my current toy and my goal toy, I guess. Um, I would say if your hole's not really just like easily accommodating it, then it's gonna. it's gonna be very hard to even get it in. Um, I mean, sometimes I would say you'd have to consider the shape of the toy because if a let I mean the blunt plug, for example, is literally a blunt shape, and once you get to the largest one, I think it's like XL or something like that, there's almost no taper. It's just like an orb or something like that. Whereas the other ones can kind of like pry your hole open and like slide in more easily. If it's not something that has that what I refer to as like a friendly shape, um, or like a friendly head, it's gonna be harder too.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. That's it's important to note that too, because sometimes your body, and like honestly sometimes you just have different days where your body's like, I'm gonna take everything today, and then like the other day I'm like, well, I feel really tight, like this is
Yeah.
not comfortable anymore, like let's maybe not
Hmm.
do this. So I
Yeah.
think mhm.
I think another thing would be to consider whether your warm up was the same as or like or let me restart. Another thing to consider, I think, would be whether you spent enough time warming up because your hull might be ready for it, but maybe you just needed like another 20 minutes or something, or like a bigger toy in between the toy that you were warming up with and what you're at now. I personally, I warm up over the course over a few hours. I think as far as I'm aware, my warm up process takes a lot longer than other people. I mean, I don't think it requires that. That just feels most comfortable for me. So I'm still using those blunt, um, those plugs. Every time I warm up, I just hop every other size, um, every like 30 minutes or something like that. So I'm like being held open slowly and wider over the course of a few hours, whereas my friends have told me that they are able to just kind of like play with maybe one medium sized toy and then they can hop on extra large toys. I don't know if I can do that, but like I just don't really want to try, I guess. I probably I don't know. Part of my warm up is also a part of my clean out too, and that is also a big part of it too. And I don't know. It's just what's worked for me for the past few years, so I don't feel like I need to hurry it. But I
Yeah.
do generally warm up for 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool to give some perspective, and I mentioned like, everyone's a bit different as well. In terms of like cleaning out and also just getting yourself like not so much for toys, but like your own body afterwards. Or is there any kind of like post care that you would like to mention as well in terms of taking care of yourself after playing?
I mean, I don't I don't think so necessarily. I mean, it's just kind of all the same protocols as if maybe you were just like having a good workout, like you want some good rest.
Totally.
I haven't really noticed a difference if like I have a more like protein rich diet or something with like muscle repair or anything like that. But um, I mean, I take it easy the next few days. I typically don't. If I'm like very sore, I might be sore. Like my hole might be sore for another like mm, 3 days max, but I typically just like won't play at all or do anything. But I think that just might be a comfort thing. But I mean, there is of course a like I wouldn't suggest someone training to be doing it every day. That's for sure. Just like giving it a rest, letting it heal.
Yeah, the rest is it's really important too. And I also think this conversation also leads into like um dom and sub complexes too, where we are ordering our subs to wear certain butt plugs for a certain amount of days and or hours, sorry, sometimes for days too. But is there anything like in terms of like length of time when you have something inserted inside of you, is there any time like length of time that you think would warrant, okay, like maybe you should take it out, or it just depends on the person kind of thing?
Mm. I don't know if I have anything specific to say about that, but I do have reservations about wearing things in general because I have hurt myself I've caused like small injuries, not they were rectal tears, but not
Mm.
anal fissures. So it's just a bit higher up than an anal fissure, luckily. But both of those happened with plugs that the lube
Mm.
on them um like was
Wore off?
yeah,
Or.
yeah. And
Mm.
so when I pulled them out or even pushed them out, it was just kind of like a lot of friction on the inside, and that's what caused me to. Now, that doesn't mean that you can never. It doesn't mean you can't or you shouldn't do that. It means that you should just be very careful when you're moving the plug, um, to re-lube it when you're taking it out, because that can. I mean, I did mention about like uh, staying power with lube, especially oily lube, helping toys to get in. But in the case of wearing something longer, I would. Well, I mean, it'll depend on the goals, I guess. Because like it'll secure the plug for sure if it does dry up, but you'll absolutely want to lube up when you're taking it out. Um,
Mm. Good point.
yeah, yeah. So that's really the only thing. I don't know in terms of like it, relative to the muscles. I don't really know anything about like risks for that.
Mm. No, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because like I feel like there's so much emphasis on lubing it up when it goes inside, but also I like that you're highlighting also too. It's important to lube when you're also pulling it out and doing that in a safe manner as to
Hmm.
not cause any injuries.
Yeah.
Quickly, if you want to talk about rectal tear versus an anal fissure, just for those who might be trying something and then they're like, okay, something happened here. I don't know what this might be, but if you want to quickly define what that is as well,
So I'm not totally sure on like the actual medical
medical term, that's
definition,
okay.
but basically, like a fissure is usually in the actual hole. Um, Whereas if you're feeling around like with your finger, if you put your finger in the hole and then just kind of like hook it over, because like there's the hole and then it spreads outwards, like the rectum flares a bit outwards.
Yes.
Um, on that like ridge, I guess, is
Hmm.
where my injury was, as opposed
Oh.
to right directly on or in the hole. So I
Mm.
think that was also a big deal in helping it heal too, because um, it's while it's in a an area, you know, that there can be a lot of friction. It's not like the actual anus itself, which is like constantly like flexing and uh, tensing and all that thing,
Hmm.
which can like easily cause like a fissure to open and reopen. But basically, it was just the location. Like it's just a bit higher up. I think it's the same injury to my understanding, um, or at least that's how I'm referring to it.
No, that's thank you for that. Just in case, like because this can happen to folks, and I just want to make sure we're trying to cover as much as we can.
Hmm.
But I mean, this whole conversation was completely eye opening, and just you have so much knowledge, which is exactly why I brought you on the show. And
Yeah,
I'm just so
thanks.
pleased with everything you had to say, Amy. Thank you so much. But as I mentioned pre-recording, there are a few questions that did come in from your fans and just people that are just really curious about certain specific things. So perhaps it might be time for us to go into some Q&A.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go in. So the first one is what?
I wish it was the increments I mentioned a bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What I found for me to be comfortable jumps in sizes took, I mean, as mentioned, I bought every size of the blunt plug, and if I did it over, I would go every other size, just because it was. I guess it just took a lot of toys to figure out all these nuances of what works for me and how I'm able to do this on a kind of like more scientific-ish way, instead of just kind of like throwing myself at it. Um, so just really being mindful of like the sizes that I wanted to jump. That's one of the biggest things, because I felt like I would have that, and also the materials, learning more about the materials that I preferred, like a soft to medium platinum silicone. I bought a lot of toys that were uncomfortable. Some were completely unusable because they were way too firm and too large for, at least for me to use. That's just my preference.
Mm-hmm. Great. This person's also writing in how to prolapse.
Oh, unfortunately, I don't really know much about that.
Me
I
neither. I'm
know.
sorry, listener. I don't know what that entails.
Yeah, I know. I know. Top Toys sells a rosebud pump, and I know that can help. It's like, creating like a vacuum. It's the same way, like a penis pump, but is for your hole. But I haven't tried that. Yeah, I've never tried that. Sorry.
That's okay. Me too. I'm sorry. I mean, if you were to define what prolapse is, are you able to define what that is in case people are also like scratching their heads?
Um, I
I already
basically
googled
it
it.
looks like you're pushing your guts outwards, like it's like, how you can like flip a sock inside out? It's like
Yep.
that, but it's like with your with
I
your
know.
insides. Honestly, it's pretty wild.
It's pretty wild. I
It's
Googled that. I'm just like, am I reading this correctly?
yeah. It's personally, I don't do it. People ask me like, show it or try it, and it's just, I personally don't want to do it for my content, and I've never tried it. It's a little
And
scary
that's
to me,
fair.
to be totally honest.
It does sound scary though. Like,
Yeah.
and if you're doing that, like, please share with us like how you do that.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool stuff.
um, we briefly went into this as well during the episode, but if you want to repeat again, this person is asking, what lube do you use, please? And if it's a powdered one, what recipe? I got X lube recently, and I feel like Walter White trying to get the right mix.
Okay. So right now I'm currently like experimenting with different lube recipes, so I can't exactly, I mean, I don't really have like a perfect recipe. I just have this note here of one that I did recently. And also, one thing to note is that this calls for making a big batch, which I use a large glass microwavable bowl. I think it's a couple liters, the capacity. And I also use a KitchenAid hand blender at a slow speed. That's important.
Mm.
So like, I mean, you could reduce the fractions. It's just that when I make lube, I make a lot, and I fill like these big mason jars with it. So,
Yay.
what I'm making recently is I add 4 cup water to the microwavable bowl, 1/8 cup of K lube or J lube.
Mhm.
Then I heat that up for 6 or 7 minutes. And of course, when that's done, let it cool down because it's extremely hot and
Hot.
sticky. Um, After that, I might add 3 tablespoons of Crisco, or around there, or maybe a tiny bit more of K lube. But really, I would say adding Crisco. If you're not adding Crisco after that, instead of adding Crisco, you can maybe add another like half tablespoon of K-lube or something like that. I'm specifically emphasizing Crisco lately just because I like having that staying power, and I find it just works really well with K-lube, even though it separates sometimes. But I like adding Crisco a lot. But of course, that also makes it a lot more oily and harder to clean up. Yeah, if you don't have Crisco, you could maybe also use coconut oil. That is might be something you might more likely have on hand. I prefer Crisco a little bit, but coconut oil is also really great. So you have like, but of course, Xlube or Klube on its own is still does a very good job.
Awesome. Thank you for the recipe. I'm sure this person's going to be very, very pleased with that. And then this person is just writing prep in exclamation marks, a lot of them. I guess the question is, how do you prep?
How I personally prep is that I have all of those blunt plugs. Um, and I use the lube that I mentioned in that recipe. I put it in like a little bowl, and I just start with putting the blunt S2 in. So I start pretty small. That's like about the size of 2 or 3 fingers. So I'll just insert that, and basically I just go on with my day, and after like 30 to 40 minutes, I'll take that out and put in the next size up, which would likely be like the S4 or the S5 of the blunt. So And I just repeat that process. And typically, I mentioned earlier that m- my warm up and my clean out is kind of the same process. So for some reason, I don't know why, honestly, it just I just found this out like along the way of doing my plays that when I keep these plugs in for extended periods of time, that is they stimulate bowel movements for some reason. And I would say maybe half the time when I switch out a plug, a bowel movement also comes out. So I'll of course clean up from that and then clean off the toy. Um, but Yeah, that is also, I guess, another point to consider when you asked about like plugging for extended periods of time is that the larger you go, the more likely that like stool will come out, when you take out the plug. So yeah, I rely on that for simultaneously to get me warmed up for bigger toys and also clean me out. Of course, I don't think it's not everybody has access or the abilities to do these larger plugs that help the bowel movement. So typically, I would suggest using like a shower enema attachment with like a bucket.
Mm-hmm.
If you aren't able to modify your shower, there are enemas that hook around your shower head. I know you can get one on Mr. S leather, and basically it's just like it hooks around your shower head, and it's like a bucket kind of like the shower head water goes into this container, and so it's as if you have like an attachment, but it's pretty great because you can like take it to like a hotel or something like that.
Right.
um, for how to use an enema or a bidet or a douche in general, there is a website called howtocleanyourass.wordpress.com, and that is a really good infographic that covers like a couple different ways to use the enema or the douching bulb. But of course, a douching bulb isn't going to get you fully cleaned out the way that you need when you are doing something like these super long, super big dildos. So you're going to need
Right.
to do an enema. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that infographic is going to have a lot of that info. Um, I guess one other part of how I clean out is that when I take out the plug and a bowel movement comes with, I use a bidet to shoot water into my hole, and then
Mm-hmm.
I squirt that out so that cleans like just the bottommost area, I guess.
Right.
Um, like it doesn't, like an enema will fill you up all the way inside, but
Yes.
basically I just have the plugs moving everything out, and then I do a shallow douche with a bidet. Um,
Mm.
and I find that does good enough. And I guess at the end of my preparing, I used the Square Peg Toys Thick Worm, and it has this like ribbed shape.
Mm.
It's like a long, flimsy worm, and it has this rib shape. And I kind of use that as like a brush, and I squirt a bunch of lube inside, so that not only helps pre-lube me for like these super long dildos, but
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like a light lube enema in a way,
Mm.
because that toy will also like kind of brush the insides and get any remaining stuff out, and that's typically, but usually the plugs will clear me out completely, followed by the shallow douche.
There we go. Full on prep process, courtesy of Amy Ivy.
Yeah,
That is fantastic. I mean, thank you for again going in super great detail because I think this can really help a lot of folks, and for those who are really just like need like a how-to guide. Um, this was a very, very insightful episode, Amy. I'm really glad that you were able to join me today on the show as our esteemed guest.
yeah.
But before we let you go, where can we all find you?
So I'm on Twitter. I my at is underscore Amy Ivy. If you're familiar with Linktree, you can just do Linktree/Amy Ivy. And that has like I'm also on like,
Everything.
yeah. I'm also on OnlyFans and Pornhub. I'm as Amy Ivy there. So
Yay. And all those links will be in the show notes below if you guys haven't checked it out, if you guys haven't clicked around already. So do us a favor if you like the content, of course, feel free to reach out to Amy, accessible via X/Twitter. If you do want to get in contact with myself, it is Stripped by Sia on X. That's where I'm most active. I'm also on Instagram as well as Stripped by Sia podcast. If you yourself are looking to perhaps come onto the show, a lot of it's invite only, but if you do want to pitch out, I'm really opening up my books right now for season 7 for those who want to come onto the show. Of course, like I'm happy to help you develop an episode on a specific topic. So go to stripbysia.com, click the contact button, and there should be a form there you can kind of fill out with as much detail as you can, because I love just reading everything and just making sure that we can make really great content and resources for everyone listening. Again, if you want to financially support the show, it's patreon.com/strippedbysia, where you can become a patron. And if you want to find me in all my other things that have nothing to do with the show but are sexy, spicy things, it's Sia on Camera on various websites that you can find as well. But as mentioned, it's new episodes every single Sunday, dropping at midnight Pacific Standard Time. And yeah, if you haven't done so already, please rate 5 stars on Spotify and Apple, and I will see you all for another episode next Sunday. Thanks so much for joining us today, Amy. It was a pleasure having you on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. You're listening to Stripped by Sia, hosted, produced, and edited by Steph Sia. Music by Ted D. Graphic design by Maria Bellandarama, and photography by Ian Dabern.